It's been a good summer for movies. I've been on vacation for the past month and haven't made a video in that time, and I was sort of thinking about how I haven't talked about the movies, especially this summer, that I've liked that much. So today in this video, I want to talk about the hidden gems and underrated films of summer 2018 that just aren't being discussed by many others here on YouTube. So no, you're not going to hear me talking about Mission Impossible here, or Ant-Man, or Solo, or any of that stuff. Here's my quick thoughts though. Solo was fun, Ant-Man was bad, Jurassic World was mediocre, and Mission Impossible, I mean, you know what I think. It's amazing. So with that, let's move on to some of the movies that most people haven't seen. I have a suspicion that like half of my audience mostly just sees comic book blockbusters, and that's fine, but maybe in this video you'll have your eyes open to some new stuff that you might want to check out. And if you do know about these movies, well then, I don't know, you get to hear my thoughts on them. That's my gift from me to you. You should be thanking me. You're welcome. All right, let's get going. All right, let's get started with this list. The first movie on my list is American Animals, which I saw back in June without knowing anything about it, and it instantly became one of my favorites of the year.
This would be something dangerous and very exciting.
I don't want to get into the plot of all these movies, but this one basically, it's based on a true story, and it follows some college students who try to rob a thing. I won't even spoil what that thing is. And they kind of base their heist based off of some of the movies that they've loved as kids, heist movies and stuff. It's very comedic and very thrilling, but ultimately at times pretty harrowing. I've heard some people say that the film is a little bit self-important and pretentious and almost Oscar baity at times, which I understand. I understand that sentiment, but I think that if it feels that way at all, it's almost meant to imitate the attitudes of the main characters, who are very self-important and pretentious and are criminals, in fact. So it worked for me. The thing that sort of differentiates it and sets it apart, which you could say is a gimmick, but I think really adds a lot to the film, is the fact that it blends the documentary and biopic genres in a way that feels very fresh. And I won't exactly spoil how that works, but it adds a lot of nuance and emotional depth and context to the film that you wouldn't have otherwise, and that was sort of what made it stand out all the more for me. Also, it's just, like, the heist is thrilling, it's really well acted, like Evan Peters is great, Barry Keoghan from Dunkirk and Sacred Deer is so good, and that's about all I have to say. It's really good. It's not in theaters anymore, but it will be on digital soon, I think, so be sure to check that out when you get a chance.
Let's do this.
All right, I don't know how I'm going to make this transition work. I guess I'll just walk off frame? Yeah. Well, would you look at that? We're in a new place. The second movie on my list is Leave No Trace, which is another film that I went into knowing almost nothing about, and I think the experience was really all the better for that. This movie is directed by Deborah Granick, who did Winter's Bone, and it's similar to that in that it's also a story of survivalism, but in tone, it's completely different. This is really a lovely movie. It has some very grim subject matter, but at the same time, I came out of the theater just like, oh, that was so lovely. Like, it's got a lot of intimacy and beauty, and I think in the hands of any other director, the plot might have been aimless and you might have wondered where it was going to go, because it really doesn't have much of a we need to do this or a dramatic question story. But the direction is so good here, and the performances are so good from Ben Foster and the child actress Thomasin McKenzie, who is lovely, that they really drive the rest of the movie. Even when there doesn't seem like there's a plot, you care about what's happening because you care about the father-daughter relationship. This is very much a movie where, as an audience member, you are sort of making judgments about the characters and thinking that you know what's best for them, but as it goes along, you're sort of humbled and you realize that, like, maybe you didn't have all the answers, and the characters don't either, but I think as the story goes along, you start to realize that their situation isn't as point A to point B as you might have thought it was at the beginning. So I really love this movie. It's not like top 10 of the year, not as much as American Animals, but it's really lovely, and I encourage everyone to see it. So that's that. All right, let's move on to the third one.
I don't think we knew where we were going.
It remains to me.
So the night before I saw Three Identical Strangers, I also saw Sorry to Bother You, which is not on this list, but was one of the most shocking and crazy out-of-this-world movies I had ever seen in a theater, and that was the statement that I made on my Letterboxd review as soon as I saw it. I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Then, one night later, I saw Three Identical Strangers, which turned out somehow to be even crazier. but for entirely different reasons. So Three Identical Strangers is a documentary that's based on the true story of these twins who don't know that their other twins exist, basically. And for the first third of the movie it's this amusing, fun, unique story that like you'd see in some sort of documentary on PBS or something, and you're like, oh, this is so crazy. That's a funny story. But as it goes along, and as it reaches the midpoint, you suddenly start to realize that things are not as amusing as they seem. And it just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper into all these twists and turns. And it ceases to be something where it's like, this is amusing. It's like Stranger Things level craziness, conspiracy, and plot twists, and all kinds of stuff that I could not believe was real. This was definitely a movie that made me consider the idea of being a documentary filmmaker, because that's never really been an option that I've considered in my life as making short films and YouTube videos go and everything. But after making this, I was like, oh wow, documentaries can be intense and thrilling and shocking and have a level of narrative to them that is fun to tell. And so this really blew my mind from that perspective. Also, it turns out to be very profound by the end, which kind of shocked me. There's all this crazy kind of surface level conspiracy stuff and like twists and turns, but by the end it's like, oh wow, this is about like the human condition, which was interesting.
I'd like to know the truth.
So yeah, I adored Three Identical Strangers. I think it is still in theaters at the time of this video, so if it's around you, I totally recommend watching it, seeing it in the theater, because that was so interesting. It's fine at home too, though. So yeah, let's move on to the next thing. I think it may require some vehicleization. Is that a word? I don't know. Vehicleization! I mentioned earlier that Sorry to Bother You was not on this list, and that may have left you wondering why. Well, it's because of Blindspotting, and that's the film we're going to talk about.
Is this an Uber? Hell yeah.
Now, to be fair, Blindspotting and Sorry to Bother You are two very different films, and there's really no need to compare them through and through. The only reason I really liken them to each other on this list is that I think they both tackle very similar subject matter, only Blindspotting does it with a lot more subtlety and nuance, to me at least. The first thing I want to say about Blindspotting is don't watch the trailer. It spoils way too much about the film, and I went in knowing nothing, as I did with many of these movies, and came out all the better for it. The only thing that I did know about the movie was that Daveed Diggs was in it, and he is obviously from Hamilton fame. If you know musicals, I mean, you've probably heard of Hamilton, whether you know musicals or not. I love Hamilton, and so I was very excited to see him in a leading role in a movie, and he was just phenomenal here. But that draw, the reason I went to see it, turned out to be minor in the grand scheme of what was so great about the film. The biggest strength of Blindspotting by far is the tonal balance. You know, if you were to put a movie like this down on paper and you were to write out all the very heavy racial and political commentary and themes alongside the totally hilarious comedic sections, someone would look at you like you were crazy. Like if you pitched this, you'd be like, how on earth are you going to balance these two things? But bizarrely and amazingly, the director totally manages to strike it where it feels authentic in its tonal dissonance, where the heavy stuff clashing with the comedy almost makes it feel more real. And I left the theater with a heavy weight on my chest because of what I had experienced, which was very dark. But at the same time, I was like, what a wild ride. That was so much fun, because it is oftentimes very hilarious and the performances support that. The film also manages to tackle a pretty broad array of themes and topics racially and politically without feeling crowded or preachy. And that was my biggest problem with Sorry to Bother You, was that I loved the creativity. It was a really interesting premise and totally off the walls, but at the same time, it was really heavy-handed, and there wasn't much nuance, and it felt at times very on-the-nose preachy. Blindspotting is not that way. It contains a lot of important messages, but never once do they feel like they're being forced upon the audience. They're just self-evident by the story.
I ain't no killer.
So yeah, Blindspotting is incredible. It's definitely on my top 10 of the year. Daveed Diggs is great, and I can't recommend it enough, because as of the making of this video, it's still in theaters. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely go and support it. Yeah, I think we can move on to the next thing. I'm gonna skateboard away with my vehicleization. The film we're about to talk about is the only action movie on this list, and that's mainly because action movies are rarely hidden gems. They're usually what everyone's talking about. The film Upgrade came out at the beginning of June, and once again, I knew absolutely nothing about it before I saw it. Are you sensing a pattern here? I do have some gripes with Upgrade, namely the world building can be a little bit dull and uninspired. The film is set in the future, but yet it doesn't really feel that interesting in terms of the vision that it has. The story can also be a little bit simplistic, but like as an action film, this is one of the most unique, off-the-walls, wild films I've ever seen. Like, the action here is not comparable to anything. You can't say, oh, it's like John Wick, or oh, it's like Terminator, or oh, it's like this thing, because it's not like anything. It is this wild blend of humor, like it's often hilarious, and gruesome brutality. It's disgusting at times, and just awesomeness. It's so cool and so interesting, and I had no idea that it was going to be that way going in. I don't have that much else to say. This is a good action movie and not much more. There is some attempt at social commentary there, which kind of works. It's on technology and stuff, but it's not like mind-blowing. This is just a really good action movie. The only other note that I would have is that this is definitely going to be a much better Venom movie than the actual Venom movie, and that will make sense when you see it, you know? The actual Venom movie is going to be like how you say a turd in the wind.
Like a turd in the wind.
All right, I think it's time to go somewhere to talk about our last movie.
Vehicleization round 3.
You can literally see it raining in the distance. We need to finish this up. So the last movie we've got to talk about is 8th Grade. Why did I save it for last? Well, probably because it's the one that the most people have heard of. And yes, it's windy up here. My hair is a mess. I'm not even going to try. 8th Grade is a movie that's getting a lot of critical acclaim, and rightfully so. And much of that critical acclaim is coming from the fact that the movie is relatable. And that's a perfectly justified way to praise it, I think. You know, Bo Burnham really does nail every aspect of this generation to a T, and in a way that really just hasn't been done on film before. You know, something like the internet has always been a very big struggle for filmmakers. How do you depict the internet and online presence in a movie? As well as just every trend that's going on in today's culture, from Snapchat to Instagram to everything. And he really nails all of it. You know, he captures it perfectly. But I don't think a film is great just because it's relatable. So I'm going to tell you about why I also think that it's great from other perspectives. Also, I can feel the sprinkles coming, so we need to hurry. Look at that. That's a wall of rain right there, and it's heading towards us. Some of the best things that are in fact relatable about 8th Grade go beyond the surface level trends of 2018 and hinge more in life experiences that we all go through. You know, there's a scene about halfway through the movie where the main character, who's very awkward and has been invited to a new kind of circle of friends, is having lunch at the mall with them. And she's sort of trying to contribute to the conversation, but she doesn't really know everyone there, and they're having their own conversation. And I was like, this is a circumstance I've been in so many times, and they nail it, you know? So it goes beyond just, you know, this is the product that people are using now, to social situations that we all have encountered. And that relatability doesn't just hinge on you being an 8th grade girl, you know? I'm a guy who's going into college, but I still find it extremely true. This film has been widely compared to Lady Bird, and it makes sense because they're both A24 films, they're both coming of age, they're both about young girls, but other than that, I don't really see the connection people are making. I mean, they're very much about different themes and different life experiences, so I do find that comparison somewhat shallow. For the record, though, I think this might be better than Lady Bird. I can't say as of yet because I might just still be in that kind of new movie craze, but I do think I might like it better than Lady Bird as time goes on. The biggest thing that 8th Grade showed me was that I want to see more from Bo Burnham, and I want to see more from voices in general from this generation that aren't going to shy away from the things that are bad about it, but also aren't going to pick millennials as like totally distracted, you know, teenagers who are just obsessed with their phones for no reason. Because this film very much is about the good and the bad of this generation, and I think that's beautiful.
When did you get Snapchat? What grade?
5th grade.
5th grade? What? Yo, see?
All right, I think we've talked about the movies, and the rain is coming. I can feel it on my hands here. So why don't we go to the subscribe screen?
You can't fight the friction, so you can't take the pressure.
Is it gonna rain or is it gonna be a pretty sunset?
can know the mind of God.
The next video I make is going to be a big analysis of Infinity War. You thought you'd gotten me into the indie box with this video, but no, I'm back to mainstream blockbusters next time. All right, look, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, comment, Patreon, all that stuff. Can I please leave so that it doesn't rain on me? All right, I'll see you guys later.
We will eat both your arms and then both of your legs, and then we will eat your face right off your head. You will be this armless, legless, faceless thing